Good tidings to you, my fellow friends. I believe you just caught me watching one of my all-time favorite holiday films, Eyes Wide Shut. There's nothing like watching some good old-fashioned porn during the holidays. I mean, that's the most resilient thing you could have. I mean, this entire movie is just Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise cheating on each other. This is like a movie version of the Pina Colada song. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, is that it? Like, Kubrick's final movie is just slow, artsy pretentiousness disguised as pornography? That's a little dumb, don't you think? Like, why say anything if all you're ever going to do is fuck anyways? Love debuted at the Cannes Film Festival on the 20th of May 2015 as a movie that's strictly about sex and all the shameful flaws that come with it. And to be honest, most of the movie is pretty damn stupid. Like, I will give Eyes Wide Shut this, at least he could bend the nonsense in that movie into a believable interpretation. There is a reason why I still consider it as one of my favorite movies of all time. Here, it's mostly just really boring, and unless you're very prudish when it comes to the subject of sex itself, there's nothing technically jarring or shocking about it, which feels uncharacteristic considering that both of them are pretty much Gaspar's calling cards. Hell, it's one of the few movies where he was proud enough to make a cameo in, which, yeah, I do like how confident that is, but was this really the movie to do it in?
I still find it unbelievably hilarious that a church is literally across the street from a strip club.
God, I love irony. In a weird bit of irony, Love is one of the most unsexy movies I have ever seen. And to be honest, outside of Love, I can't necessarily think of a single No Way movie I downright hated. A little embarrassing to admit considering Gaspar's biggest passion in filmmaking is to be hated, but he does it in such a talented way that personally, I see his provocativeness, if that's even a word, as somewhat of a badge of honor. No matter which quote-unquote controversial film you've seen in the past 10 years, it's always certain that they're mostly influenced by his work, pretty much citing himself as the godfather of disturbing films. Hell, it's pretty much impossible to click on any list of the most disturbing movies without him being the de facto pick. Every single goddamn time.
Monica Bellucci.
He's been considered time and time again as one of the best modern directors of all time, but at the same time he's also seen as the worst, the pinnacle of divisiveness that hates anything too mainstream and downright refuses to meet the average moviegoer and his diehard fans halfway. I know that sounds unbelievably pretentious on my part, but just look who we're talking about here. Same rules apply for this ranking as anything else. That means we're only going to be sticking to its feature-length outings, and let me tell you something, this is not going to be the definitive list. No Way's films can be such a pain to categorize, and what would end up being my favorite on this very list would probably be completely different a year from now. Then again, we'll probably see about that since No Way is planning on making a kids film in the near future, which you don't know won't be his best film, so fingers crossed. With that being said, let's take a look at the only good thing to come out of France outside of polos, cheese, and Amélie.
Don't forget the bitches.
Gaspar Noé. And yes, that Leslie Nielsen clip was intentional. I mean, just because I'm bi doesn't mean I hate women, okay? Okay, I'm sorta bending my rules a little bit to include this one since it's around 20 minutes short of your bare minimum running time, but I'd figured that I should include this one for being another great example of how much No Way doesn't care about your opinion or even your health. There aren't really any interesting behind-the-scenes tidbits I can really find, but I presume what really went down is that No Way was so disappointed by the critical success of Climax that he vowed to make his most shocking film yet. A 50-minute magnum opus whose main focus is trying to finish off the young kids Pokemon wasn't able to kill. Oh wait, that joke was already taken? Let's just call it the final boss of epilepsy. Which, yeah, I'm gonna say it, those last 10 minutes are pretty much the only thing people remember about the movie. I'm not saying it's bad at all, the acting's pretty alright, and I do like the split-screen approach that Noé would later perfect in his next project, but outside of those, it's not really that interesting, per se. It's a film about making a Cecil B. DeMille-style witch-burning scene that goes horribly wrong. What else is anything new? Then again, it's probably my fault for not watching it in the way Noe attended, since it would probably be more effective on me if I actually did watch this in a theater, but for now, I'm just gonna give it the subtitle of Lux Aeterna, or How a Movie Could Seduce You with the Production of a Witch Burning and Then Kill You with Flashing Lights. Sounds like a typical party in France to me. With special guest appearance from Sufjan Stevens. Seriously, it'd be a dream come true if Sufjan Stevens appeared in a Gaspar Noé movie. Like, come on man, get on it. Hey, post-editing Bryce here. Just to let you know, as cool as it would be to see these two work with each other, because they're both amazing artists in their own right, Noé's last film was about a couple suffering from dementia, and Sufjan just last year was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, so yeah, I kind of take it back. Please don't get on it. I Stand Alone was the first in a lot of things, including the Frankenstein approach to combining 16mm with the widescreen CinemaScope format, and the one that started a complicated relationship with the Cannes Film Festival, but it was also the first proper feature film from Gaspar himself. Loosely inspired by a trip to France he took with his father and a drive-by comment about horse meat, which then got him to decide that a horse meat butcher would make for an interesting character study. What would be his life? How would he go about his life? What would be his political beliefs? Does he like the works of Jean-Pierre Jeunet? I don't know. This ended up being the basis for his short film Carne, where he brought in an at the time unknown French actor Philippe Nahon to play the butcher. Presumably he liked him in that role so much that he got him to play the butcher in that film too, and later on making a cameo in Irreversible. That's pretty cool. It was also the first recorded instance of people walking out during a few screenings of his films, which the guy saw as a badge of honor. Nowadays, I don't think he has that goal anymore, with him diving into more personal stories like with Vortex, but back in his heyday, you being disgusted by what he's showing on screen, whether it be a talented morphing of several different aspects of filming, or just the subject matter in general, would be seen as an automatic win for him. And it kind of disguises the fact that this film isn't that great, but I didn't entirely hate it either. First of all, it would be pretty unfair if I just started dogpiling all over this thing without at least giving off a few things that I actually liked about it. And I will, for my name isn't Desner. Cue the laugh track! I think our feet are gonna slip. I think our hands are gonna shake. I think our... See what I did there? The acting is pretty good overall, the cinematography itself is pretty amazing, all things considered. And while the subject matters covered here are played more for shock, it is done very effectively and are not done just for the sake of being edgy. Something that most disturbed filmmakers don't necessarily get the memo about. Edgelord 101. If you are planning on tackling any subject that's considered touchy in some cases...
Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Another thing that I love about this movie is that it is disturbing, and even Gaspar knows it, ultimately breaking the fourth wall near the end with text saying that you have exactly 30 seconds to leave the theater if you want to avoid watching the last couple of minutes of the film. Even at the kinda young age of 35, Gaspar was already seen as a provocative genius, and this was one of the many examples of that. Also, watching this in tangent with Carne, which acts like the precursor to the events of I Stand Alone, was pretty damn awesome to see unfold. But I did say that I was going to base this list on how each film stands up on its own, so I pretty much wasted 40 minutes of my life for nothing. Good job, me. Even with all that, and as much as I do want to give this a free pass as this was Noé's first time in the directing chair, it is pretty hard to say that I actually liked this movie. And it might just be a me problem since I got this straight from the Internet Archive, but I'll just say this. The audio quality is beyond atrocious.
Une vie, c'est comme un tunnel. Et à chacun son petit tunnel. Mais au bout du tunnel, il n'y a même pas de lumière. Oui, il n'y a plus rien. Même la mémoire se décompose avant la fin. Les vieux le savent bien.
No, really, that's literally the only reason as to why I didn't get into this movie as much as I did. Everything about it sounds like it was recorded right out of a tin can. And you can't even blame the French for this, since films like La Jetée and Run Lola Run, two films that are mostly reliant on sound design and editing, are some of the most crisp sounding films I've ever seen, so how it sounds like this, intentional or not, is beyond me. It got to the point where it was so disorientating and unbearable after a while that at the 40-minute mark, I had to watch the rest of it in 10-minute increments, simply because it was starting to give me a headache after a while. Which, Gaspar, if that was the intention, good job, man. You definitely succeeded at giving me a migraine. Yeah. That's all I really have to say about this movie outside of, well, look at that color of blood. You could paint the look of Madonna with that. While I Stand Alone falls into the category of being a movie that I think I liked, Irreversible, however, falls into, okay, I liked it, but Jesus, did you really have to go this far? Because, yeah, this is a movie that focuses entirely on that word. And it's so horrifying that I can't even put it into words. And that's not just because of the subject matter too, that kind of goes without saying. But it's in part because it just forces you to sit there for a while, witnessing this horrific act going on right in front of you. And that's the thing I've noticed in most of Noé's work. They're mostly done in one shot, which, with that kind of fun ingenuity, I would usually praise because I like weird camera angles. What else can I say about that? But with films like this, it feels more like we're diving into the mental headspace of a character rather than it being a genuine character study, and it never cuts away or even obscures parts of the shot so you don't see what really happens. You're just left there front and center and forced to watch this poor woman getting anally assaulted and beaten to near death. It is without a doubt one of the most terrifying films I have ever watched, and it is still as effective as it was when I first saw it. For the first half hour. But hey, even if that last quarter isn't talked about nearly as much, it is a nice breather from what just transpired because that rape scene was haunting. It's the kind of horror that forever scars you and is an experience that you never want to revisit for as long as you live. And the last 40 minutes are kind of like an ice pack in a way, with the film itself pretty much saying to you, it's okay, all of that is behind you now. But even that is very discomforting, especially since it ends with the reveal that Alex was pregnant the whole time, and knowing that it was done in reverse order, that scene at the end with Alex being at peace with a bunch of children running around in a field, it's suddenly a lot darker with that context. Don't get me wrong, I never want to see this movie again for as long as I'm alive, but at the same time, I can't say that it isn't a groundbreaking technical achievement in French cinema, both in discomforting storytelling and just how it's edited in general. And while we're at it, let's talk about the most unappreciated part of the entire film, the music. It was done by Tamar Bangalter, who you may know as one half of Daft Punk, and, well, let's just say if you're a big fan of some of the more abstract cuts off of Aphex Twin's Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, then this probably wouldn't be too out of the box for you, maybe a little bit of an overstatement to say that it's great even. But you pair those terrifying, repetitive, ambient moments with the visuals of an accused rapist getting his face mangled up by a fire extinguisher, then that state is going to feel a whole lot smaller, almost to the size of Rhode Island. I love this soundtrack to bits. It's not my favorite out of his entire filmography, but it's certainly attention-grabbing, and considering that most of the film is pretty silent, it gets pretty stressful once it starts to get going. I have nothing else to say other than its controversial reputation is more than deserved, and it's safe to say that I am forever avoiding underpasses for the rest of time. Yes, even Urchin Underpass. Oh dear, I think I might have given Zone Town her next one. Enter the Void is an interesting one. Not to say that Noé's other films aren't interesting, it's just that this one in particular is mind-boggling to me considering that this is his longest movie, sitting at a grand total of 2 hours and 41 minutes. That's as long as these movies, and the added total of all of them combined wouldn't do justice to how much of a headache this one was to watch. And you know what? I've been dying to cover this one ever since my Andy Warhol video, so let's get this over with. Enter the Void is without a doubt Gaspar Noé's obra maestra cinematográfica, being shot mostly as a companion piece to Irreversible, with it being told in reverse order, and is so unbelievably convoluted that even reading the Wikipedia summary didn't clear anything up. Which makes sense because this is from the point of view of a drug dealer who gets shot and is watching his life flash before his eyes until it ends up looping in on itself in a never-ending torrent of misery. And the overhead establishing shots are him having an out-of-body experience that feels so real half the time you're questioning if you're dead. And that's in part due to the jaw-dropping cinematography done by longtime Harmony Korine collaborator Benoit Debie, who expertly captures the bleak universe that the movie crafts for itself. It falls under a category of film which I like to call the acid trip film. Films that either give you an out-of-body experience with its trippy visuals like Seam After Devil's Heaven, or made under the influence of drugs and concepts that's a little too ambitious for its budget, like Seam After Devil's Heaven, or films like Jan Svankmayer's Alice that still give me nightmares to this very day. And there are many, many directors out there, some that I've mentioned or even covered on this channel before, that make films specifically with that mindset. Charlie Kaufman and Spike Jonze always have something trippy up their sleeves. Don Hertzfeldt is a bona fide modern surrealist icon in animation. David Lynch and Michelangelo Antonioni, which is one that I don't hear mentioned as much when it comes to weird film directors, but he came out with Zabriskie Point back in 1970, which features a couple having sex in the desert, a 6-minute series of explosions, and music by Pink Floyd. Seriously. There are so many different interpretations on how the story of this went down, but I feel like if I go down this drug-fueled rabbit hole that I'll never come out. And I'm more comfortable staying in one rabbit hole, thank you very much. But I will tell you that this entire film is huge, like really huge. This thing is nearly 3 hours long, and it's something that Gaspar has held in such high esteem, to the point where he said that he literally birthed it. Madman. And I know this may seem hypocritical on my part, considering that some of my all-time favorite movies are longer than 3 hours, but Enter the Void always felt daunting to me because of its length alone. I can become satiated with Noé's style of editing and extreme fourth wall breaks for an hour and a half or so, but having to deal with that for as long as the time spent in the waiting room for a dentist appointment? As long as you have a pretty damn good reason as to why 161 minutes worth of trippy perspective shots is a little too much for me. Which is why I much prefer our next movie on the list, Climax. Hell yeah, now this is the classic gothic horror that I could truly get behind. Actually, hold on, nope. That's the 1994 Boris Karloff version. Hold on, give me that. Alright, there we go. I know you are all probably expecting for this to be number 1 on the list, and I'm not gonna lie, I kinda was too. It's honestly really difficult to talk about it without just relaying stuff that people had already said about it, because yeah, it really has grown to become one of the most iconic modern horror movies. One that takes the fear of not being in control of yourself and multiplying it by 6. The whole film is like a descent into hell, nothing but a ton of screaming misery and death, which normally I wouldn't be a big fan of if that was all it was, but there are just so many amazing things going for it. Things like the cinematography, done once again by Benoit Debie, which I'm advocating for right now. His name alone should be a genuine selling point. The fact that every performance was entirely improvised, which in itself is also insane. The music, done once again by Bangalter, and the one thing that I find most impressive about this movie, the number of shots. Stephen Follows once analyzed that while the number can vary, the average number of shots in a single movie can be over 1,045 shots. Now there are some movies out there that try to minimize that in order to stand out, like 1917 and Birdman had only 34 to 16 shots respectively in it, but were cleverly edited together to give off the illusion that it was all done in one take. Or films that actually go all the way with being one take, like Russian Ark from 2002 or Boiling Point from 2021. And Satin Tango just sucks. I love that movie, but I feel like it only exists just to piss me off personally, with the whole thing being 7.5 hours long and only having 172 shots. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. The thing is that after the opening credits, which are 47 minutes into the movie by the way, the rest of the film outside of the ending were all done in a single 42 long take, which is really impressive to me. All this madness done in one singular shot, I can't even begin to describe how difficult it must have been to get all that right on the first try. How do you even stage this? It is such a surreal polarizer of a descent into madness, and for the first time in this list, I loved each and every second of it. Only Gaspar Noé can make Aphex Twin's window looker absolutely terrifying, outside of, well, Aphex Twin himself. This is Carrie and Lowell. the critically acclaimed 7th studio album from experimental folk singer-songwriter Sufjan Stevens. An album that reflects on the loss of a parent that he never got to know and the ever-growing fear of death. In a way, this is Sufjan's skeleton tree, not just because it's quite possibly the best album in his entire discography, but it's also the most depressingly bulldozing music experience you'll ever have, especially if you listen to it after losing a loved one. I bring this up because right when Noé was making a star in his next feature film, he suffered a brain hemorrhage that put him in the hospital for several weeks. The same hemorrhage that killed his parents. He thankfully recovered and even got an idea for a movie from that. He recruited Suspiria director Dario Argento, and in 2021, he went on to release Vortex. And I'm not trying to gatekeep anybody by saying this, but this movie will ruin you.
La vie est un rêve, non?
Oui. La vie est un rêve dans un rêve.
This movie was something that had sat in my mind ever since I first saw it back when it first came out. And the longer it did sit, the more the flowers of it bloomed. And the more it bloomed, it became yet another reminder that we are only temporary in this world. Outside of Climax, it's probably the closest I've ever gotten to genuinely loving a Gaspar Noé movie. And that is in part to it being the most personal to date and the most honest depiction of dementia I have ever seen in a movie. Being done in this split-screen style that we have seen before in Lux Aeterna, but it also feels a lot more lonelier as it goes on. It's his best movie by far, but it's also haunting in a way that no Noé film has been so far. It's uncomfortable, it's terrifying, it's hopeless. It's like the title describes, a vortex that we're all going to be sucked into one day. The vortex of death. It's like what Sufjan Stevens once said. Well, you do enough talk, my little hawk, why do you cry? Tell me, what did you learn from the Tillamook burn or the 4th of July?
We're all gonna die.
You know something about this ranking? It's pissed me off. Like, beyond pissed me off. I don't know why. I knew Noé was a dark director, and I was hoping to get at least a few jokes out of how overly nihilistic he is. Like, oh look, Monica Bellucci is in one of the most disturbing movies of all time. Now laugh at how try-hard Noé is. But I honestly just came out this sad. Like Vortex was haunting. Irreversible was just haunting. Like, there are so many films here that I wouldn't even want to joke about, even to my worst enemies. It is just awful. Every step of the way, it's just awful. And you know what? To end this all off, I'm just gonna go to town, drink my sorrows away until I eventually die. Just like the rest of us. That being said, until next time, which probably won't be a next time. Bad dreams, sisters.
Oh, trust me, I'm not leaving until all the crows know about my gang. Let me just take a swig.
Hey everyone, thank you for checking out the beginning to season 3 of Expressing My Thoughts. If you want to keep on supporting the channel, the best you can do for now is to like and subscribe to be notified about whenever I come out with a new video. I usually don't like to show myself out like this, but I've been hearing from the grapevine that this actually works, so if you could do that, it'll be much appreciated. As for when the next video will come out, I don't fucking know. That matter is only between me and ambiguity. We're good friends. You're the best. Bye.